Welcome, Hop Nation. It's my absolute pleasure today to have my good friend and business colleague, Kirk Baethke, on the program. Kirk is a master expert, world-class communication expert. He's been in broadcasting from radio and TV for over 25 years, but I think more like 30 years, close to 30 years.
If you count volunteer and unpaid work, yeah, it's probably, it would be 30 now. Absolutely.
That's awesome. And you've done speeches as a kid. So this is a calling from a very early age. Grew up farm town, avid sports fan, married to his wonderful wife, Kathy, for over 25 years. You got your anniversary coming up, I believe, in August here, celebrating 26 this year.
We'll give you July.
Okay, July.
You're close.
Okay, well, I know I have it in the calendar, so I'd get it right. But okay. Hey, the fact I nailed the 26th year is a win at this stage.
Partial points, definitely.
Yeah, partial points. And then your lovely fur babies, your Keyshawn's, Radar and Tulip. I had a brain fart there.
They're barred behind the door, so hopefully there's minimal barking while we're having our conversation today.
We're good. We've prepped everyone for it. So welcome, Kirk.
It's nice to be here, Corey. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So normally we do the founder story, and we're doing something a little different. You and I talked about this with this podcast. We're recording this on April 20th, 2020. We're in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis. You had some colleagues and friends in the broadcasting industry actually reach out to you recently, and you've been helping out with Stingray Radio and the local station here, helping provide news updates and that, and really, seeing the value of communication at times like this in a global pandemic and how that reveals itself in leadership. And you also have a real strong leadership background. So you were a leader in different roles with one of the largest telecom companies in Canada. And now through the work you do a lot of leadership training and stuff using that experience with communication, because as you and I have talked, more than 98% of issues in any organization come down to communication. So it's a skill set we all wish we were better at. You're my communication coach, so I'm glad to have you here, Kirk. Tell me what's going on right now, and what are you seeing in terms of communication and leadership right now? And let's just have a discussion about this today.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now is people are, at least in my experience, and I can't speak for everybody, this is just through my lens, people are looking for heartfelt, sincere, compassionate communication, especially right now. Old communication styles that are confrontational or judgmental or come with any sort of perceived bias is not really welcome, I think, right now. People want to know that when they are being heard, they're being heard honestly, and that when they are speaking, they're speaking openly and honestly with authenticity and compassion. And those are things that I think translate into leadership at all times. But I think what this pandemic is forcing a lot of people to do is just take a step back and think about, well, am I being my best self? Am I doing things the right way? Do I need to re-examine some of the things that I'm doing from, a leadership or a communication perspective? And the thing that is, I think, freeing for a lot of people, liberating, is that everybody's the same. Like everybody on this planet is vulnerable to the coronavirus. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. You might respond differently, in a health way, in terms of one's, physiological reaction might be different. Some people might get sick. Some people, unfortunately do pass away. Some don't even have any symptoms. So this is the great leveler. And I think this gives people an opportunity to really communicate as true equals even if there's a hierarchy, if there's a structure, if there's, a business client relationship, which does tend to color the conversation from time to time, depending on expectations, et cetera. But I'm seeing right now is people just want to connect and do so in a way that's sincere and meaningful. And you convey I understand you. I understand where you're coming from. And since the goal of communication is to be understood and to understand,
yes,
I think this is a great time for us to just take a step back and take a look and say, okay, am I being the best communicator? Therefore, am I being the best leader? Am I taking everything into account when I'm talking to my employees, my colleagues, my superiors, any of those people?
So just friends and family.
Yeah, exactly. Because people are people too, if you want to use that term. And I think it's important to remember that we're all in this together. No, it's not easy, and it's not going to be regular for a while. So if you can get to that place more quickly, then I think you're going to be in a better place mentally. We're going to go down that road a little bit. But I think to go back to the communication and leadership, I think it's going to really it's going to give people the opportunity to communicate from a compassionate, authentic, and even vulnerable position.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how this pandemic has really brought the global community together like nothing else we've seen in history, where it's come together. And, there's many blessings in all of this as well. Like, we've talked, being able to have the time during the day, our work days, to be in proximity with family, to know we're actually safe and have, systems and healthcare that we can, survive in. One of the things that when you were saying made me think, we're in this social distancing and socially isolating situation, but there's a difference between social distancing and being lonely and that. And right now, there's lots of talk around, the emotional and mental health side of this, the longer it goes on. And I know mental health is, one of your passions and things that you study and look at. And, what are your thoughts on that? Well, and what you're hearing, because you get the communication from all the experts and you're collaborating. You have more information than anyone I know right now because of the roles you're playing.
Well, and that's a question that I think would need to be answered in a forum much longer than a podcast, because that's a very loaded question when it comes to mental health and all that. And I'm not an expert, but I do understand the challenge that this creates for some people, especially those who are inherently social, who need to be around people, who are out and about. This is something that I think early on in the distancing measures, the isolation measures that jurisdictions have put in, they quickly changed the terminology from social distancing to physical distancing. We have to remain physically apart from people to prevent the spread. But the big but was people still need to connect. And we're seeing that in virtual ways. Your podcast is a virtual channel, but this is becoming a lot more normal and a lot more people are making use of it. So we're seeing people address those needs virtually by talking to people that they know, on the phone, video conference, video calls. You see a lot of faith-based groups doing that as well for their celebrations, their services, for churches and whatnot. So you're seeing all that. So those things are being addressed, but I think it's because this is such a weird situation. Like, this is so different. It's like nothing anybody has ever seen, unless you're a very, very old woman from Manitoba who's 109 years old who lived through the Spanish flu. And that's a real story.
I heard that interview.
Yeah, and by the way, she said, my advice to all of us, is to stay home. So that's what we're doing. But no, there's no doubt there's a mental toll that this is taking on people. And I think that is more to do with the uncertainty. It's not so much that we're unable to connect, but it's grounded in the fear of what's going to happen. What's this going to look like? How are we going to do this? Things that were pretty programmed. Yes, you do this in June, you do this in September, you do this there. And all of that has been thrown out the window. So there's that great uncertainty. And the one thing that I've tried to do, and I have good days, I have bad days, is to realize that things will be as they should, as long as you act appropriately with integrity and, put your best self forward, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
So I think it's important for all of us to realize that we're not going to change the big situation quickly. No. It's not going to be something that is going to look like normal for quite some time. So you try and do the best you can. And I know that there are a lot of people in very difficult circumstances, and I want to commend governments at all levels, because they're acting with compassion. They see what's going on, and we're all just trying to figure it out. And I think what can help people deal with mental health, the emotional health, the emotional stress of this whole situation, is to know that when they are communicating with somebody, they are being heard and they are being understood. Mm-hmm. And that's why communication right now is so important, to do so effectively and to do so compassionately. And there's always got to be, in my opinion anyway, that undercurrent of, I understand you. I'm not just hearing your words, but I know where they're coming from. So,
and that's the power of communication, is how you're doing it. And there's a few things you said. One, the correcting of the change in languaging and communication from social distancing to physical distancing, because we all have an inherent need to be somewhat social. Like, we need relationships. It's one of the core beings. Even for the person who's more of a loner and an introvert, there's still a fundamental need at a subconscious or unconscious level.
Agreed.
And the other thing that you brought up there that I found fascinating was we need to look at ourselves and be doing the things. And it made me think we need to be focused in on ourselves, but not be selfish, because all these measures we're taking are to protect the broader community. And it, we see some meatheads out there, and we saw those spring break videos and that infuriated a lot of us, with the, I'm not at risk. Well, it's the grandmothers, it's those people. And I know you and I have to be very careful ourselves, because we have people around us that are very susceptible. And I have asthma, so I'm an at-risk person myself. So when I hear things like that, it's crazy, but it's that not, and I saw something today from Admiral, he was the Vietnam POW for 8 years, and they came up with that, there was a syndrome, but or the paradox of, we need to have faith in times of crisis, but also be very aware of our current reality. And, as much as that's going back, to the 60s, and something that was said in his interview to Jim Collins when he was writing Good to Great, I was thinking to myself, like, how true that is right now. Like, you need to have a certain level of positivity and not be part of the problem. Mm-hmm. And you've heard me talk that way. It's not denying reality, because there's a very real part of that. And he was talking about, when he was asked, well, you were able to get through it for 8 years, who didn't survive? And he said, the optimists. And I thought, okay, this is interesting, because I'm always referred to as the optimist, as you know. But what he said was, they were saying, we'll be out of here by Christmas, and then Christmas, then Easter. And it was all of these, and that, going back to the mental health played into it. And I thought to myself, okay, so you don't want to have Pollyanna thinking, you want to have a positive outlook, but you need to be very aware of the current reality and respect and play that out.
And owning your role in it. Like, you can't just abandon yourself to the process. You can't just say, oh, it'll be what it'll be. It doesn't matter what I do. No, you still have to conduct yourself in a way that is, you're honest with yourself, but you're true to yourself, and you're also compassionate. Even if your true self, your true nature is, a bit angry or, dare I say, prickish. Abrasive. Yeah. Okay. Here's me, the wordsmith, going down the gutter.
I'm not sure that other word is a real word.
No.
Maybe it is.
I've been known to
Probably
make one
is.
up from time to time too.
I love it. That's a Coreyism.
There you go. But my point is, you still have to know what your role is and how you can influence others by just the way you conduct yourself. And if you are, going back to the communication part of it, if you can conduct yourself in a calm, rational, thoughtful, and empathetic way, that is the effective way to communicate. Ranting and
right.
Setting people off, and having all that underlying fear and hostility. That's going to be a tough place to be for very long. So finding a way to, again, connect with people in a real, authentic way is what's required right now.
Absolutely. I want to bring us back to the leadership that we're seeing in this, because we're seeing a huge divergence. And we've talked about this, how politics aside, there's certain people who are stepping up and shine in times of crisis. And then there's others that seemingly poop the bed, and there's huge diversity in this. I mean, we're here in Canada. We have in the province, our provincial health officer, Dr. Bonnie Hendry, is getting kudos globally for some of the communication that they've done exceptionally well and moves they've made in leadership, and Adrian Dix, and then we have our federal leader in Justin Trudeau, and then stateside we see Donald Trump, who has a different messaging. Then you have the Prime Minister in the UK, and then you have someone like the Brazilian president and what they're doing. What are you seeing from a leadership standpoint during this crisis in terms of how they're communicating and performing as leaders?
Well, I think what you're seeing is, at least, again, my opinion, and I just see what I see. I think the leaders who are able to convey a degree of emotional intelligence through this are the ones who are showing the best. And that's not a competition. It's not, I can do this better than anybody else. It comes down to one's nature. And I think, for the most part, in Canada, we've been very lucky that the leaders at municipal, provincial, and federal levels have all displayed a high level of emotional intelligence. They understand the people they're talking to. They understand the position they're in, and they are crafting the message, and they are crafting it, no doubt. This is not just off the cuff, but they are creating and presenting the message in a way that shows that they understand and they get where we're at. And they're also not being overly optimistic. They're not jumping to conclusions. They're not, getting too far ahead of themselves. They have all said, and I am one who agrees with this, that we need to take our time with this. We need to be smart and follow the advice of those in the know, who are the doctors and the scientists. So,
and evidence. We're seeing, evidence-based management. We teach this, we preach this as, and having research to help give us the confidence and the information we need to make better decisions. Well, we're seeing that in different magnitudes with different leaders, and that's where.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to something that I ran across early in my management career, and I subscribe to this philosophy as well, as servant leadership. What do you need? How can I help you?
Yes.
And what we're seeing from virtually everybody across the board, certainly in Canada, and to a great degree, many places. I don't think there are many that are really, off the rails when it comes to their approach. They're doing the best they can given all the pressure that they're on. But
no one's doing this perfect. I think
no.
I think some are doing better. No one's going to get it perfect. Because you don't have the time to make fully informed decisions and get it more right. You're having to react quick on limited information in a crisis situation versus complex decision making.
Well, and going back to the something that you and I have, you've studied more than I have, but I really get into this a little bit, is the Cynefin framework of decision making. Going from complex to chaotic states, and this is certainly chaotic. But going back to the servant leadership concept, is that people in leadership have kind of gone through the process of, well, what do you need? What do people need? How do we help them? And of course, we're throwing a ton of money at this because that's what people need to give them some confidence and some assurance that, we'll make it through this. So I think you're seeing a good example of that, where they are putting themselves in the position of, the average person and saying, well, how can we help them get through it? And they're communicating, for the most part, very effectively, and giving people confidence that, we're doing what we need to do. And I would think the vast majority of the population would agree with that. There are some others that have different opinions, and that's fine. But I think what we're seeing on the whole is society getting it. And we'll get there. We just need to stick with it. We need to show some perseverance, the things that you like to talk about, grit, determination, all those things. We need to show that as a whole, not just in the day-to-day, not in the grind, I'm trying to, grow this, I'm trying to build this part of my business, I'm trying to develop this person. No, this is a larger concept of grit and perseverance.
And this isn't
everybody's being called to it.
This isn't weeks. Everyone's now talking, this isn't weeks. We're talking months, and the impact of this will be years. Mm-hmm. That no one's denying that. We're also hearing kind of discussion now about, okay, there's going to have to be a phased in program of moving back to whatever the new normal is. I don't think it's all of a sudden a vaccine and, we get in front of this COVID a bit and things are back to normal. I think due to this experience, we're learning, and there will be some sort of new normal. And, one thing that crisis does, and we've talked about this, is it really hones priorities. Mm-hmm. And at times like this, health is number one. You can have all the accomplishments in the world. You have a health scare, you would trade it all in a heartbeat for the health. Mm-hmm. So we know that having relationships and love and support around, and times like difficulty and crisis, are priorities. And I think that's heightened. And I think good public habits and respect are higher, that, maybe there's less of this individualistic selfishness that, a lot of the Western culture has embraced through the ages. But I don't know, what are you hearing?
Well, I wouldn't say embraced. I would say fallen victim to, when it comes to the
marketing and
and we were kind of victims of our own success in many ways on a societal level. So I think what we're seeing is just that reprioritization. What's really important, and is it really all about me? And because the messaging, when it comes to the virus, going back to that, communicating the message is stay home so you don't affect others. That's the big thing. So we're forcing people to think of others when, the default has likely been for a good number of people, they're thinking about themselves first. So there's that balancing now. Okay, well, I got to look after myself, and I am important, but does that mean I am more important than the 85-year-old neighbor who I just can't go and talk to because I might give her something that will end her life? Pretty profound stuff. And I think we're getting real deep into the whole virus thing. But I think when we really boil it back down to the ability to communicate, it's just taking the time to listen. Hear people out. People are communicating from a position of fear and uncertainty, and you have to be willing to take the time and just acknowledge and understand it. Even if they don't talk about it explicitly, that's the undertone of every conversation anybody is having right now. And it's important to acknowledge that that's where the conversation is coming from. It's not generally from a position of selfishness or self-gain. People need to work, people need to put food on the table, all very important stuff, but it just changes the way we look at it and just provides a little different perspective when it comes to dealing with others and communicating with others. And it's really important too, when you do so virtually, to remember that, when we're talking to people, the words are important, but it's as much about body language, facial expressions, tone, all of those things when it comes to communication, especially now because we aren't face to face with people as often. We have to be really careful that when we're in this virtual environment, we are mindful of those things that can taint communication or create mixed signals. You're saying these words, but it's coming out in a way that is incongruent with what you're trying to get across. There's anger or fear, hostility, or
and we can read tone into things.
Oh, yes.
We've probably all misread a text or an email and interpret it in a way that the tone was different than the intention of the person sending it.
Yeah.
And it speaks to richness of mediums in communication. And our co-author on the book you and I have written, Wei Ma, who's in a long-term care facility. I mean, he's literally in lockdown because they're the most vulnerable. And, with CP and MS, he's a high risk. And, with the heart disease not that long ago, I know very early on for him, he didn't have video conferencing facilities. So the only communication he could have was through phone. And that was really difficult, I know, because the level of richness in communication is a lot less because we lose all the visual cues, which is the majority of it. Depending on which research you look at, it's 55 to 65%.
Yeah, something like that. And here's another wrinkle I'll throw into that conversation is there are a number of counties in the U.S. which this week are mandating the wearing of masks in public. So if we're communicating through masks, we're only going to see eyes. We're not going to see any of this stuff from the nose down. So it's really important. Yeah, it's hard to convey that. So that's why eye contact's so important. You can smile with your eyes if you're kind of angry, but if you're a little bit more upbeat, that's going to create a little more openness in the conversation.
Or zoned out.
Or zoned out. Oh, wake up.
I can do that one real well.
Sorry if I've zoned you out. I can
Nope.
go. But the point is, we have to be cognizant of the changes that this pandemic is creating in the way we can connect with people. So be mindful of that. I think that's the important thing is, okay, it's going to be different. How do I make sure I am communicating and leading effectively through this transition from the old normal to whatever a new normal is going to be? And
I think intention and reaching out, I'm seeing a little more effort in that. I think of my extended family, like you get caught up too much in other life and unprioritizing that. And at times like this, you kind of get honed back. And, whether it's, we love when we're getting together for something like a wedding, but as we get older and older, we find that a lot of times when we're seeing and talking to an extended family and friends is at funerals. It's something negative, and it takes something negative to, snap us back into place. And, that's sad. And there needs to be some sort of grounding and prioritization. I hope that there's a learning that comes from this that fundamentally changes, us as individuals, but also the broader society, and that empathy that we're really part of a global community more and more now. We're seeing it. And this really, in a physical way, demonstrates it.
If there's one thing I would like to see that comes out of this whole experience, for however long it lasts, is that when it's all, starting now, and not when it's over, starting now, that people just make a conscious effort to be kind. We get caught up in our stuff. We get caught up in all the all the things that are swirling around, all the stresses and all that. It tends to color our ability to interact with people. But just to pause for that split second and I have to remember to be kind. And that goes a long way. And I think for people's mental health, for people's stress, if they can, instead of spreading the virus, this is going to be corny as hell. Don't spread the virus, spread the kindness. Just be that little bit nicer to people.
You know what? That's a great one. TM.
Yeah, quick. Call the lawyer. But I think if that would be the one thing I would like to see out of this, is just the acknowledgement that when people are interacting, just to remember to be kind. Yeah, there are things that maybe aren't going well, but we're all there. We're all in the same boat. This is not something that is exclusive to me, exclusive to you, or exclusive to the person watching this. We get it. We're there. Some circumstances for some people are better than others. We acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
But I will make that conscious effort to be kind to anybody I come across. I hope that's the same. I hope that's the same for anybody else. And the only way to convey kindness right now is through communication, because you cannot physically be around people to express that.
And respecting what we're being told, because this isn't about us and our own stuff and frustrations. Mm-hmm. So those that are stepping outside these rules are making it about themselves. And it's not, as much as you had mentioned earlier, we have to be aware of self, and that we cannot be selfish at a time like this.
Yeah, self-aware and selfish are two completely different things.
Big time.
And because we have that heightened self-awareness, because we have to be so vigilant on what we're doing. Okay, I need to wipe this. I can't go here. I've got to stay this many feet away, or this many meters away from people. That's rewiring of the brain, and that's hard. So again, everybody's going through it. So when you are interacting with people, it's a pretty good baseline. Like we're all here. Like I said earlier, it's the great leveler.
Absolutely.
Nobody is. Well, those who have and have come out on the other end are immune, but that doesn't mean we haven't come from the same place. So
immune from first wave.
Yes, that's right. And who knows what it's going to look like should there be a second wave, which people are predicting.
So as we're winding down, our podcast today, one of the questions I normally ask all guests, as is, their high performance success habits. Let's change it up and go, if you had 3 points that you wanted to make of how to be the best person you can be, or to be successful, in this context, what might those 3 points be? And you don't have to re-mention the one, the being kind. Mm-hmm. I think they say that expression again, the TM one.
Oh, don't spread the virus, spread the kindness.
Yeah, I think as a meta theme, that's a great one.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that that's a clever Kirkism. I think that's just a way of conveying what people are already doing, and to me, that's the most obvious thing. Because I think if you are kind, then I do anyway, I'll feel good that I was my best self today because I treated people with kindness. I think, for 2 more things, I think one of the things is to be conscious of your communication. Know what you're saying, how you're saying it, know who you're saying it to, and understand what position they might be in. The first thing you learn about communication is who's your audience when you're crafting your message. Who am I speaking to? And it might be someone at the grocery store. It might be someone at the gas station. It might be, it could be anybody. The person dropping off your takeout order, whatever it happens to be. Just know that when you're speaking to them, choose your words as best you can and be positive. Have the best tone you can be. And if you're not, allow yourself that vulnerability to say, you know what? I'm not in the greatest place today. I might be a little cranky. And then people will know. So give yourself the opportunity to, be open, be authentic, and communicate in the most effective way possible. So I think that would be the second thing. Really take stock in your communication opportunities. Make the most of them and have the best possible interaction. And I think the final thing is just to know that we're all on the same level. This is a challenging time. That's an overused phrase, but it is. And we just need to be aware that everybody's going through something. And if you have that level of emotional intelligence, that emotional awareness to kind of put yourself in their shoes, which is basically what emotional intelligence is, and communicating from that perspective, then you're going to have positive interactions. You're going to feel as good as you can about yourself, given what's going on, just knowing that I was the best person I could be that day, and I treated people with humility, respect, and kindness. It's a wonderful thing to do that, I think, given how unique the situation is, that this is something nobody has seen before for all intents and purposes, and we're trying to figure it out as we go. And maybe that'll be 3B. None of us have the answers. Recognize that we're just doing the best with what we know, and we will make decisions when we get the information. That's something I learned from my very wise mother when I was quite a bit younger. Make the best decision you can with the information you have, and move on. And then you'll give yourself a chance to, operate accordingly. So I think those are probably the big themes that I would like to see as, people operating and just having that big picture, the meta, as you call it. This is the big thing that's going on in the world, and we're just trying to make our way through it and do it the best way and most authentic and professional the way we can.
Absolutely. The one I would add before we close is there needs to be almost a spiritual groundedness for people, because I know personally, and that's not a religious statement, because spirituality means different things and people practice that in different methods. But what I have found personally, and at the toughest times in my life, whether it was losing family members or like the really bad stuff, there's just stuff outside of our control. And this is one of those things that we can control certain things that we do, but it's really beyond our control and it's bigger. And to realize that we can't control everything. There's things we can't control. And that's where a spiritual groundedness is needed, to have kind of a peace at times of unease. And, there's different ways and practices that people can do that. We don't need to get into it here, but I do think, having faith of some measure that there will be an end to this and something on the other end that will make us better, humanity better, and us better as individuals. And to, sometimes we need to give it up, to higher powered, universe, whatever that is for, you as a listener. But you need a groundedness in terms of all the information and that's going on to bring some peace at a time where it's being challenged.
Yeah, and I would fully agree with that. I think having that sense of, like you say, that faith, that spirituality, call it what you will,
yes.
To know that there are lots of things out there you can't control. And I think that is frustrating a lot of people, because a lot of people have done well by controlling to their best abilities their environments and how they conduct themselves day to day. But this is totally out of their hands. And a lot of people have been told to close their business. You can't go to work because of this. And I'm lucky I'm still able to do some of the things that I do. You as well.
Well, and you've called back. Like, you became, you had left the industry, and because of the need, you did a sacrifice to go back to help and be part of this during this time, because you have a skill set in that can help. And, the strength in communication, one thing that I'm thinking about right now that we want to make sure we get out to listeners is, when it comes to communication and we talked about evidence-based management, the quality of research and sources that people are using for information to get informed is very, very important. Mm-hmm. So whether you're making decisions on best practices, a leader, peer-reviewed, randomized things like that are, some best practices. Right now, social media and, the people who are just spending lots of time and throwing stuff out in conspiracy theories and stuff like that, that's just not helpful. Like, that's someone using time in entertainment. I think you really, really want to pay attention to sources of information in communication to, and getting information. There's some people who, are avoiding information a lot of times in communication and going by gut and intuition. This would not be a situation where just using your gut and intuition would serve you well.
Yeah, going into the media component for a moment, you're absolutely right. When it comes to information that we share with Canadians, on the various reports and newscasts that I'm back doing, we are so judicious with the sources. If you see something on social media, okay, great, but then you need to back it up to about 3 or 4 levels to make sure what you're seeing is correct. Fortunately, when it comes to giving out the information that we do, it comes from scientists, medical officers, the leaders who are in those positions based on qualifications primarily, to make sure that people get the right information. And you're absolutely right about the sources. Know the source. If you're suspect of where it's coming from, dig into it. And this is not the time to be misinformed or be party to misinformation. I saw one of the reports we did last week mentioned that Facebook was going to be sending warnings to people who liked or shared virus hoaxes.
Exactly.
COVID-19 hoaxes or misinformation. So already you're seeing social media saying, look, we recognize that we have to be very aware of the information that gets out there. And again, that gets down to communication, making sure what you have to share with someone is factual, is correct, and done so in a way
or well-researched.
Well-researched, and done so in a way that is informative and not designed to create fear or panic or anything like that. It's information, things you need to know. And for people in the general public, I hope even through this really weird time that people will take the time. And again, we have time. It's not like we're rushing around and doing a bunch of stuff. We have the time to really sit down and think about where we're getting the information and what we're sharing with other people. So again, going back to the communication part of it, know your audience, get your stuff straight, and convey it in a way that is meaningful for the person you're talking to.
Absolutely. And be part of the solution, not the problem.
Exactly. And, here we are waxing poetic about a worldwide thing, just a couple of guys in Western Canada. But I think this is a pretty common conversation. I'm hearing it on various media platforms, radio, television. And people are watching television. People are getting news from TV and radio again because they know that has long been a trusted source. There's a lot of good stuff on social media too. One of the most interesting things I read last week came in via social media. But again, digging down into it and realizing where that's coming from. So,
exactly.
It's doing the research, taking the time, and just the recognition that, we're all in the same boat. We're all on the same planet, folks.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time today, Kirk. It's very timely. That background and skill set you have and the role you're playing in getting information out, because I think the information that gets out gives us a sense of comfort. And even when it's not something we want to hear, like, oh, we're going to be, social distancing and not able to, go camping or something, because this is a time of year where people are starting to think about it. The more information we have and being radically transparent gives a sense of comfort and trust that doesn't make it easy, but it makes it easier.
Exactly. And I've enjoyed the conversation. I like having these conversations about communication and making sure people are at least aware. If one person has a takeaway from this, and say, I'm just going to be more conscientious when it comes to how I communicate, then I think this has been a valuable conversation. My hope is that people again, I think if you're watching this and you don't know who Dr. Bonnie Henry is, look up Dr. Bonnie Henry, British Columbia, Canada, and you'll see that what she's just trying to do is to provide information and to be reassuring. Be kind, stay safe, be authentic, all those things. That's the message. So I hope if there's anything that people take away, it's just those things. And I wish everybody out there all the best. And I will convey be smart and stay safe.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kirk, and have a great day. Thank you very much, Hop Nation. We'll see you next week.